Okay, this is October 28th. This is a 9-question review of chapters 6 and 8 on integer operations as well as fraction operations. So your first question gives you a picture and says, what multiplication expression is this? So what we have here is the first fractions being 2/3. And if I think, how many 2/3 do I have? I have 4 of them, so I have 4 groups of 2/3, which is an expression. Or if you had 2/3 times 4, both those are fine for this question. So either way, it's 4 groups of 2/3. I do not need the answer. It's an expression, not equation, which means you don't have to have an equal sign. But if you did, the answer would be 8/3, which is 2 2/3. Question number 2 says, what two different expressions is this picture? So the hint was one's a division and one's a multiplication. So let's start with multiplication. How much of 3/4 do I have? I have half of 2/3. So, or 3/4, excuse me. Half of 3/4 is the first multiplication expression you can make. Now, if you had 3/4 times a half, that's wrong, because we have half of 3/4. And the other way to think of it is being 3/4 divided into 2 parts. And when we really think about this, it makes sense. Why? Because we learned in the last section that dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal, and the reciprocal of 2 is a half. So therefore, multiplying by a half is the same thing as dividing by 2. Question 3 says, what are A, B, C, and D? So in order to solve this, I have to figure out what the area of each is. I'm going to use a blue marker for this one. So A is a rectangle, so its length times width would be 2 times 1. So the answer for what is A is 2. The area of A is 2. B would be 2 times a half. Now I can probably do that in my head, because if I double a half, I would have 1. So the answer for B is just 1, or 2/2. Sorry, Logan. C is 1 by 1/5. And 1/5 multiplied by 1, or anything multiplied by 1 for that matter, is itself. So 1/5 times 1 would be a fifth. And finally, D is the only one I really have to kind of think about. It's 1/2 times 1/5, which is 1/10. So A is 2, B is 1, C is 1/5, and D is 1/10. Now, if you added those all together in your head, you got 3 3/10. 3 3/10. 3 3/10. Question number 4 is BEDMAS questions with integers. It says 2 take away the product of +4 and -2. So your next line should be 2 take away -8. And then if you like to subtract without changing to addition, you can. I prefer changing it to addition and the opposite of the second integer, just like with division. 2 plus 8 gives a final answer of 10. Question 5 says -10 plus 6 divided by, remember this line can be thought of as divided by, -2. So the first thing we're going to do is simplify this. So keep in mind, this is kind of like if I was to write this, the question above kind of looks like this. So you have to simplify the numerator of this division first and then divide the answer by -2. So what is -10 plus 6? Well, I have 10 negatives and 6 positives. That's 4 negatives. So -4, not +4, but -4 divided by -2 is a +2. Question 6 says -2 multiplied by, remember there's no operation in there, it means multiplication. So -2 multiplied by 5 take away 10. And 5 take away 10, people, is not 5, it's -5. So -2 times -5 equals a +10. Now, your last 3 questions are your fractions. It says, what is this product? 3/4 multiplied by 16 33rds in lowest terms. So obviously, I do not want you to go 3 times 16 is 48, and 4 times 33 is 132. You can definitely do that, but reducing it becomes much more labor intensive. I'm going to simply think of 16 over 4. Oh, sorry. I'm going to think of 16 over 4 as this fraction, and in lowest terms, 16 over 4 would be 4 over 1, and 3 over 33, 3 over 33 in lowest terms would be 1 over 11, So therefore, when I multiply my numerators, 1 times 4 will be 4. 1 times 11 will be 11. And my answer is 4 elevenths. Now, if you didn't cross reduce and you got 48 over 132, the pathway to the answer is slightly more difficult. 132 cut in half would be 50, 65, 66. Divided by 2 would be 12 over 33. And then you'd have to know divisibility by 3, so both are divisible by 3. You get 4 over 11, right? That pathway will still get you to 4 over 11. Obviously, cross reduction is easier, less intensive, and much easier to kind of get your answer quickly. Your eighth question says 1.5 times 1.5. The easiest way to do it is to convert both of these to improper fractions first. So 3 halves times 3 halves. Multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators to get 9 over 4, which is 2 1/4. And finally, your last question is 2 3/4, what we're working on right now, divided by 1.5. There's two methods you could use: common denominator method or multiplication by the reciprocal. Obviously, that's the one we like to go to. So when you do this, you have to make sure that you never use mixed fractions. Convert both of those mixed fractions to improper. So 8 plus 3 is 11/4. 2 plus 1 is 3 halves. That's the equivalent division statement as improper fractions. Keep your first fraction, change to multiplication, and use the reciprocal. If you don't cross reduce, you get 22 over 12, which would be 1 10/12, which would reduce down to 1 5/6. If you did cross reduce, so 2 over 4 would reduce down to 1 over 2, which would give you 11 over 6 when you multiplied it, which is 1 5/6 as well. But either way, the final answer is 1 5/6.